Hey everyone, buckle up, because today we're diving into the Adam and Eve story, but not the one you might be thinking of.
Yeah, this isn't your grandma's Sunday school lesson. We're talking a book straight out of the Columbia University Science Library.
And let me tell you, this deep dive gets real interesting. We're talking ancient civilizations, global wipeouts.
The works, the author, Chan Thomas, well, he dedicated this book to, get this, his wife, some military big shots. We're talking General Hal Grant, Admiral Taylor, even the Joint Staff. And
His critics. Wait, he dedicated his book to his critics. Okay, that's a new one. Talk about leaning into controversy, huh? This guy sounds like he was ready for a debate.
he was definitely marching to the beat of his own drummer.
So what's the big idea here? What were those critics signing up for when they opened this book? Fasten your seatbelts, folks, because Thomas reimagines the whole Adam and Eve story as a metaphor for ancient civilizations getting wiped out by massive, repeating global disasters.
Okay, hold up a sec. We're talking like end of the world, floods, earthquakes, volcanoes erupt.
Everything. And he's not just spinning yarns either. He dives deep into geology, history, trying to find proof for these crazy events.
All right, you've officially got my attention. Let's do this thing.
So picture this. Page 3, he just throws you right into it. A cataclysmic event. The Earth's crust is groaning. There's this low rumble, louder than any earthquake anyone's ever heard. Mountains in California are swaying like ferns in the wind.
Okay, I can already hear the disaster movie music playing.
Right. Then, out of nowhere, the Pacific Ocean rises up in this 2-mile-high wave, and I'm not exaggerating, 2 miles high, and smashes eastward.
Talk about a bad day at the beach. Does he at least try to explain how something like that could even happen?
Oh, he sprinkles in the sciencey stuff, for sure. He talks about the Earth's crust, molten layers, supersonic winds. It's almost like he's trying to make you believe it could really happen.
So just enough science to make you go, what if?
Exactly. And then, and this is where it gets really wild, he describes what happens after this mega disaster.
The calm after the storm. Or should I say, the calm after the cataclysm.
Think total global makeover. On pages 4, 5, and 6, he's talking about landscapes rearranged, continents flipped around.
Wait, hold on. Like the planet just hits shuffle on the continent.
Pretty much. He straight up says the Bay of Bengal, over by India. That used to be the North Pole.
Whoa, that's a serious case of geographical musical chairs. But what happens to everything else while the world is busy rearranging itself? Antarctica, the Arctic, all that.
Gone. He says the ice caps on Antarctica and Greenland, they're toast. Melted away, revealing these lush landscapes underneath. Meanwhile, Australia, that's the new mystery continent. Nobody knows what's going on down there.
Talk about turning the world upside down. But somewhere, somehow, life finds a way, right?
That's the thing. He talks about a new Stone Age starting up, which suggests this whole thing, civilizations getting wiped out, starting over. It's not just a one-time deal.
So it's like this crazy cycle of destruction and rebirth. That's a pretty intense concept. But is there anything in actual history to back up this whole cataclysmic cycle idea?
He seems to think so. He points to all these old stories about global floods, sudden geographic changes, things like that. Even throws in some quotes from scientists like DeLuc and Dolomieu on pages 9 through 12. They were talking about sudden revolutions of the Earth way back when.
Okay, now I'm hooked. But before we go any further, we got to talk about those frozen mammoths. You know, the ones they find buried in ice? What's the deal with those?
Oh, yeah. Thomas was all over that mystery.
Yeah.
He dedicates a whole section to them on pages 12 to 14, talking about how they're often found frozen mid-stride, they just froze instantly.
With their last meal still in their stomachs?
Exactly, like someone hit the pause button.
Yeah.
And he even mentions that one mammoth, the Beresovka mammoth? The one they found with buttercups still in its mouth.
Yeah, that's both fascinating and a little bit sad.
Totally. But it plays right into Thomas's theory, see? He's convinced those mammoths were flash frozen during one of these sudden cataclysms. Boom, instant ice age.
And to try and piece it all together, he's got that table of North Polar eras on page 24, right?
Yep, that's his timeline. He uses it to show when and where these cataclysms supposedly happened, pulling together evidence from geology, history, even anthropology. It's like he's saying, look, this is a pattern. It's happened before and it'll happen again.
That's a bold statement. So he's really saying the Earth's crust can move that much, that fast, just rearranging continents like they're puzzle pieces.
That's what he's suggesting, yeah. But, you got to take it with a grain of salt, He was a big picture thinker, and sometimes the details got a little fuzzy.
I hear you. So speaking of big picture thinking, we've got to talk about probably his most out there claim, his whole take on the Genesis story. He's saying it's a metaphor for these recurring cataclysms.
Right. Like, he actually says that the man, in the story,
Yeah.
that represents a whole civilization, one that existed before the big wipeout.
Okay, so where do Adam and Eve fit into all of this?
So Adam, he's like this survivor. The guy who makes it through the cataclysm, carrying all the memories, the knowledge from the old world to the new.
Okay, that's a new take for sure. But what about Eve? Where does she fit into this whole metaphor?
Eve's his daughter in this interpretation, right?
Yeah.
So she represents how that knowledge, that spark of civilization gets passed on. Like, even after everything goes haywire, there's still hope for a fresh start.
So he's saying the Adam and Eve story isn't just about the first two people on Earth. It's bigger than that.
Way bigger. It's about how humanity picks itself up, dusts itself off after getting knocked down. And get this, he doesn't stop there. He gives symbolic meaning to, like the whole Garden of Eden thing, the serpent, all of it.
Okay, now we're going deep. Lay it on me.
So, the garden. Think of it as that peaceful time before everything goes sideways. Paradise before the storm,
Right, right. And the serpent.
The serpent. That's the destructive force of nature, the thing that throws everything out of whack.
Makes sense, but doesn't he also say the serpent's a symbol of wisdom and change? How does that work?
It's like, yeah, the serpent brings destruction, but destruction can clear the way for something new.
Yeah.
It's about those cycles we were talking about, the end of one thing, the beginning of another.
Okay, I kind of see where he's going with that, but this one event, this cataclysm, he says, happened 11,500 years ago. He really zeroes in on that one, doesn't he?
He does. There's a whole chapter about it called The Event, page 41 if you want to look it up.
On the event, catchy. What's so special about that particular cataclysm?
This is where it gets super specific. He says that 11,500 years ago, get this, the Bay of Bengal, that was the North Pole, the Pacific Ocean, South Pole, and Greenland and Antarctica, kicking it on the equator.
Now, that's what I call global warming. But, I mean, seriously, how does he explain something that massive happening? Is any of this actually, scientifically possible?
That's the question, isn't it? He uses scientific terms, talks about geology, all that, but the evidence to back it up?
Well, let's just say it takes a bit of imagination. So more like, hey, think outside the box for a minute than hardcore science.
Exactly. But here's the thing. He wasn't just a geologist or a historian, right? This guy, he was into everything. And that includes astronomy. That's where this whole Bo-Titus relationship thing comes in.
Bo-Titus relationship. That's a new one. Remind me what that's about again.
It's this mathematical pattern someone noticed about the distances between the planets in our solar system.
Right, okay. But how does that relate to ancient cataclysms? That seems like a bit of a leap.
Thomas thought it was all connected. He thought these massive cataclysms, they were powerful enough to mess with the planets, maybe even change the Bo-Titus relationship over time.
Hold on, back up. He's saying these events weren't just some earth-shaking events. He thought they could affect the whole solar system.
Yep. He believed it was all one big interconnected system. Kind of a mind-blowing concept when you think about it.
It definitely makes you wonder, what could possibly cause that kind of upheaval? It would take some serious force, some major cosmic event to trigger something like that, right?
That's where he brings in this whole concept of magnetohydrodynamics, or MHD. He even describes this experiment with, like, mercury in a glass cylinder on pages 108 to 110 of Aftermath of the Adam and Eve story.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that sounds a little suspicious. What was he trying to prove with that mercury experiment?
So picture this. You've got this glass cylinder, right? Filled with mercury, just like he describes. And you spin a little agitator in there. That's the MHD part, the interaction between magnetism and fluids. And when you do that, it creates these wild patterns, these totally unexpected movements in the mercury.
Okay, I can see where he might be going with this. But how does spinning mercury in a glass relate to, the Earth flipping over and mammoths freezing instantly?
Because he's using that experiment as a model for what he thinks happens to the Earth.
Yeah.
He's saying our planet is like that cylinder of mercury, and something happens. He calls it a null zone, where the Earth's magnetic field weakens. And when that happens,
Everything goes topsy-turvy.
you got it. He's saying that's when the Earth's crust can shift, poles can flip, and all those cataclysmic events he talks about. They're not just random, they're connected to this magnetic flip-flop.
So this invisible force field, the Earth's magnetic field, that's the key to it all.
According to Thomas, yeah. He's saying when that field weakens, it's like shaking up a snow globe. All the continents, the oceans, the snowflakes just getting tossed around.
Okay, I gotta admit, that's both kind of cool and totally terrifying at the same time. So what are we supposed to do? Just wait for the next magnetic flip out and hope for the best? Or does he have any, practical advice on how to deal with this whole cataclysm thing?
He actually talks a lot about survival, both in the Adam and Eve story and even more in Aftermath. And you know what he says is most important? Knowledge.
Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
But how's that going to help when the Earth's crust decides to play hopscotch with the continents?
Because if you understand the cycles, if you know what's coming, you can at least try to be ready. He talks about having a safe place, storing food and water, learning essential skills, being prepared for anything.
So it's not about giving in to fear, it's about being aware and taking action.
Exactly. It's about facing the reality that, yeah, maybe crazy stuff has happened in the past, maybe it'll happen again, but that doesn't mean we're powerless. We have a choice in how we respond.
So what I'm hearing is build a bunker, stock up on canned goods, maybe learn how to start a fire without matches.
That's part of it, sure. But he also talks a lot about the importance of community, of cooperation, of remembering those human values, love, compassion, all that, even in the face of disaster.
So it's not just about physical survival, it's about something more.
He seems to think so, yeah. He's saying that the way we treat each other, the way we build our communities, that matters, especially when things fall apart.
That's a really powerful message. But how does that tie into his whole theory about cycles of destruction and rebirth? What does he think happens to the people who do survive?
He's got this idea that those who make it through, they're not just lucky. They've learned something. They understand the cycles. They value knowledge. They know how to work together. They're ready to build a better world from the ashes of the old.
So it's not just about surviving the disaster itself, it's about what we do afterward. About rebuilding, but maybe rebuilding differently, better this time.
Exactly. And that's where his ideas get really interesting, I think. He connects these cataclysms to this whole larger spiritual journey.
Oh, tell me more about that.
He believes that it's not just about wiping the slate clean. It's about forcing humanity to evolve, to learn from our mistakes, to become something more.
So he sees these cycles of destruction and rebirth as necessary.
Kind of like a cosmic wake-up call. He even suggests that the civilizations that don't get it, the ones that don't learn the lesson, they don't make it through.
Wow. That's a lot to process. So it's not just about physical survival, it's about spiritual growth, about becoming a better version of ourselves.
That's one way to look at it.
It's a lot to unpack, that's for sure. But it does make you think. What do you think? Am I wrong?
I don't know if you're wrong. I mean, who are we to say? But he certainly makes you look at things in a new light, doesn't he? Makes you wonder, what if?
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. Survive the cataclysm, learn the lesson, rebuild a better world, and then, well, repeat. But where does this whole spiritual evolution thing fit into all of this? What did Thomas think was waiting for us on the other side of all that destruction?
He seemed to believe that these events weren't just about hitting the reset button, but about pushing humanity toward a higher state of being. He talks about civilizations rising and falling based on how well they embodied certain principles, things like love, compassion, cooperation, all the good stuff.
So it's like a cosmic test. The civilizations that get a passing grade stick around and the ones that don't. Well, let's just say they get left behind.
It's a pretty intense way to think about it, but I can see where he's coming from. He argues that civilizations that prioritize things like cooperation and compassion, those are the ones that are going to be better equipped to deal with these massive upheavals. They're the ones who can pick up the pieces and create something new, something better.
It's a really interesting idea, this connection between a civilization's values and its ability to, weather the storms, both literally and figuratively, I guess.
It really makes you think, what if empathy and cooperation, those qualities that make us human, what if they're not just nice ideas? What if they're essential for our survival as a species?
Okay, that's kind of blowing my mind a little, but it still leaves the big question unanswered, doesn't it? What are we supposed to do about it? How do we prepare for something this big, this world-changing?
Thomas was a big believer in knowledge as a form of power. He believed that the more we understand about these cycles, about the potential risks, the better chance we have to adapt and survive.
So it's not about panicking, it's about being aware, about making informed choices.
Exactly. He talks about things like creating a safe haven, stockpiling supplies, learning survival skills, all those practical things that could help you get through a tough situation. But he also stresses that true preparedness goes beyond the material.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the non-material side of preparedness look like?
For Thomas, it's about building strong communities, nurturing those values of compassion and cooperation we talked about, and fostering a deep connection with the natural world.
So it's about being prepared, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually.
You got it. Because when it comes down to it, surviving a cataclysm isn't just about staying alive. It's about what kind of world we rebuild afterwards. And that starts with who we are as individuals and how we treat each other.
Wow. It's a lot to take in, but it's given me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
It's definitely a wild ride through history, science, and spirituality, that's for sure.
You said it. So, to our listeners out there, if you're feeling adventurous, if you're ready to challenge your assumptions about history and maybe even the future, I encourage you to check out the Adam and Eve story for yourselves.
And if you do, let us know what you think, because we always love a good conversation.
That's right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.